A group of middle school girls were in a room watching a strange movie together for the first time. They decided to watch it at one of their houses since no adults were home. Hanol was part of the group, but she didn't understand most of what was happening in the movie, though she thought some parts were inappropriate. However, she saw two actors kiss in the movie, and she found it so beautiful that she still remembers it clearly. She wished she could share a kiss like that with someone she loves because she thought it would be wonderful. Years later, the three friends were much older and found themselves shopping at a lingerie store. They were browsing through some clothing because one of the girls was planning an overnight trip with her boyfriend and expected things might get more intimate than usual. Even though the conversation was hinting at something romantic, Hanol, who was with them, didn't quite catch on at first. One of her friends made a teasing gesture to help her understand, and only then did she realize what they were talking about. The friend who was going on the trip seemed excited, especially because she mentioned that her boyfriend had big hands, and she was curious about what that might mean for their time together. However, both friends could see how clueless Hanol still was about these things, which surprised them. They knew she hadn't gone to an all-girls high school, so they thought she might have had more experience or knowledge by now. As they continued shopping, the friend planning the trip suddenly asked if they were interested in going on a group date. She explained that her friend from the physical education department kept asking her to go on one because there was a really good-looking guy who would be there. One of the friends immediately turned down the idea, saying she wasn't interested. Meanwhile, Hanol, still somewhat naive, asked if the guy was as handsome as Jae Sunbi, her upperclassman in her department, showing she was more curious about a specific type of guy rather than the group date itself. Hanol's friend quickly claimed that there was no way Hanol could compare Jae Sunbi to one of the top two hottest guys in the entire university. Hanol, looking surprised, asked who else could be that good-looking besides Jae Sunbi. Her friend immediately told her it was Min-cheol from the business management department. She added that, in her honest opinion, Min-cheol was even more popular than Jae. Excitedly, Hanol's friend started listing all of Min-cheol's attractive qualities, saying he was tall, dressed really well, and had such a presence that she once saw him from afar and mistook him for a celebrity. She was convinced that Min-cheol was the complete package. But despite all this praise, Hanol wasn't impressed. She shrugged and said that, to her, Min-cheol looked more like a delinquent than someone to admire. At that moment, Min-cheol suddenly appeared, playfully pinching Hanol's cheeks and teasingly asking if she had been talking about him. Hanol, caught off guard, was surprised to see him and quickly asked what he was doing there. They immediately started bickering, trading playful insults and remarks, much to the confusion of their two friends. The other two ladies stood there in shock, watching this unexpected interaction. It slowly dawned on them that Min-cheol and Hanol were actually childhood friends, a fact they had never heard before. The surprise grew even more when they realized just how long Hanol and Min-cheol had known each other. They had been friends for 20 years, practically their whole lives. Their mothers had met in the same maternity ward, meaning the two had been close since the day they were born. Coincidentally, Hanol and Min-cheol had lived in the same neighborhood their whole lives. They went to the same kindergarten, primary school, middle school, high school, and now even attended the same university. Their relationship was unique, shaped by years of constant companionship. Despite this long history, their personalities were so different that they clashed like cats and dogs whenever they crossed paths. Yet, despite their frequent bickering, they shared similar hobbies, which led them to hang out often for various reasons. Because of this close bond, Hanol believed that Min-cheol might be the reason she couldn't get a boyfriend. She figured that other guys didn't want to approach her because Min-cheol was always by her side. This thought had been bothering her so much that she couldn't even focus during class. Lost in her own world, Hanol was completely shocked when she suddenly realized that they had been given an assignment, snapping her back to reality. Since starting university, Hanol and Min-cheol have been spending more time apart than they used to, giving her more opportunities to meet new people, especially guys. She was hoping to find someone she could gradually transition with from friends to something more. In fact, she had managed to set up a dinner date with a classmate the next day, feeling excited about the chance to take a step forward in her love life. However, as she was on her way to the dinner date, Min-cheol suddenly appeared and asked why she hadn't been replying to any of the texts he had sent her. Before Hanol could even respond, the guy she was going to dinner with got intimidated by Min-cheol's sharp stare and quickly bolted, leaving Hanol standing there in disbelief. Furious, Hanol kicked Min-cheol in the shins and vented her anger. She yelled at him, asking why he kept ruining her plans and complaining that she couldn't even make friends properly because of him. She accused him of behaving like a delinquent, which made people afraid to approach her. In her frustration, she told Min-cheol that she wouldn't eat with him again and that he should try to keep his distance from her going forward. After bickering for a while, Hanol and Min-cheol finally told each other off and parted ways. As Min-cheol walked away, Jae, Hanol's upperclassman, appeared and approached her. He raised an eyebrow and asked with a smile why she was swearing out loud in public like that. Embarrassed but quick on her feet, Hanol responded that it was all because of the assignment, trying to play it off while feeling pleased to see Jae Sunbi. Jae chuckled, knowing exactly what she was talking about. He had done the same assignment back in his freshman year and admitted it had been tough for him too. Jae, noticing Hanul's frustration, kindly offered to help her with the assignment. He explained that the task was based on a movie, and with the deadline approaching quickly, she would need all the help she could get. Jae then mentioned that he had a USB full of good movies he had collected during his freshman year, and suggested she check it out for inspiration. Excited by the offer of help, Hanul eagerly agreed, thrilled that Jae was offering to make the assignment easier for her. Jae then told her she could come over to his place to pick up the USB, possibly even that same day. Hanul, feeling like it was a godsend, immediately agreed without hesitation. The idea of going to Jae's apartment for something as simple as an assignment made her even more excited. As she walked away, she couldn't help but mentally thank Min-cheol for unintentionally enabling this opportunity to spend time with Jae. When Hanul and Jae arrived at his apartment, she was surprised by how messy it was, especially given how composed and polished he always seemed in public. Clothes and books were scattered all over the place, making it hard to find a spot to sit. After awkwardly scanning the room, she finally found a small clear area on the couch and sat down. Jae rummaged around for a while before finally locating the USB. He handed her a cup of juice, apologizing for the delay. As Hanul accepted the cup, she couldn't help but notice how large his hands were. Her mind wandered back to some of the things her friends had told her about big hands, causing her face to heat up as she blushed, feeling awkward. Jae noticed her sudden weirdness and asked if she was thinking about his hands, catching her completely off guard. With a playful smirk, he added that he was quite huge all over and even pointed out that his ring finger was longer than his index finger. As he started to move a bit closer, the situation became too much for Hanul. Panicking, she jumped up, quickly grabbing the USB and blurting out that she had to leave. Without giving him time to react, she made a hasty exit, her heart racing from the strange and unexpected encounter. Hanul couldn't stop thinking about what Jae had said about his fingers being longer than others, and it kept gnawing at her. Feeling curious and needing answers, she decided to ask Min-cheol about it since he was a guy and might know. However, in her frustration, she completely forgot about the fight they had earlier. Without much thought, she barged into Min-cheol's apartment, ready to scold him for not checking his phone despite all the messages she had sent. But just as she stormed in, her words froze in her throat. She had walked into an awkward scene. Min-cheol was watching something weird on his screen, something she didn't expect. What made it even worse was that her picture was displayed on the screen while he was doing that. Min-cheol quickly realized that Hanul might have misunderstood what she had just seen. As she stepped out, looking like she was ready to leave without a word, he called out to her, urging her to wait. Don't misunderstand, he pleaded, clearly flustered. He knew this looked bad, but he needed to explain himself. Meanwhile, Hanul stood by the door, trying to make sense of the situation. She knew Min-cheol well enough to realize he wasn't that kind of pervert who would use his childhood friend's picture for something inappropriate. In fact, she remembered that Min-cheol always forgot to lock the door when he was in a good mood, which was probably why she was able to walk in so easily. Still, the image she saw had left her feeling uneasy. 20 minutes earlier, Min-cheol had been feeling frustrated about their earlier argument. Though he was irritated, he knew that what he said to Hanul was for her own good, even if it led to another fight. Trying to distract himself, he decided to watch something random and weird to clear his head, which was unfortunately when Hanul had walked in. Confused by how Hanul had managed to enter, since he was sure he had locked the door before starting, Min-cheol inspected it closely. It was only then that he discovered the door was broken, which explained how she had managed to walk in without him noticing. As Min-cheol was watching the weird video, he received one of Hanul's usual funny messages. Amused, he minimized the screen to check his phone, not realizing he had also muted Hanul's chat notifications. This decision would later lead to Hanul coming to check on him, worried about his silence. When Hanul walked into his room, she was met with an unexpected sight, her picture alongside that strange video. Although she claimed she hadn't heard anything from what he was watching, she felt the awkward tension and quickly decided to leave. Min-cheol, however, sensed that Hanul didn't entirely believe him, and that frustration built up inside him. He felt tears prick his eyes, upset at the thought that she didn't trust him after all these years of friendship. Outside, Hanul paused, wondering why Min-cheol had been crying. It left her feeling uneasy and concerned, but she pushed those thoughts aside as she made her way to her classroom. Once inside, she began to ponder her weekend plans. She noticed that Min-cheol hadn't called or texted her, which worried her a little, but she tried to convince herself it was expected. After all, the awkward situation they had just been through would surely leave him feeling down. But as she sat in class, a thought struck her. She couldn't remember the last time she had seen Min-cheol cry. Not even in primary or middle school had she witnessed that kind of vulnerability from him. While Hanul was lost in her thoughts, one of her friends noticed and called her attention, reminding her that class had already started. Her friend pointed out that Hanul had been acting a bit strange lately and expressed concern, mentioning that Hanul hardly reached out to her the previous weekend. Feeling confused, Hanul didn't know what to do. She thought it would be weird to tell her friend about what she saw at Min-cheol's place, but she still wanted to hear her friend's opinion, as she was feeling frustrated. Summoning her courage, she decided to share her feelings in the simplest way possible. Hanul mentioned that she had been thinking a lot about another friend. She hesitated, unsure how to continue, but she felt the need to express what had been bothering her. Min-cheol was at his friend's hostel, feeling uneasy about leaving. His friend had been hinting that it was time for him to go, but Min-cheol didn't want to leave just yet. He noticed that his friend's roommate hadn't returned, which made him feel a bit more comfortable staying a little longer. However, his friend was worried. He explained that Min-cheol could get into trouble if they found him there. The hostel had strict rules, and being caught could lead to penalties. If Min-cheol accumulated too many penalty points, he could be kicked out of the dorms, which would make things complicated for him. Despite his friend's concerns, Min-cheol wasn't ready to leave. He reassured his friend that he had a plan. If the time came when he needed to escape, he joked that he could always jump out of the window to the second floor to avoid getting caught. His friend, sensing the heavy atmosphere, decided to lighten things up by suggesting that Min-cheol use the opportunity to hang out with a girl he used to date from the media department. It seemed like a good distraction, and he thought it might cheer Min-cheol up. However, what his friend didn't realize was that Min-cheol was lost in his own thoughts. Suddenly, without any context, Min-cheol exclaimed loudly, expressing his regret for something he had done. His friend was taken aback by this outburst and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Min-cheol continued to grab his head in frustration, overwhelmed by his feelings of regret. He wished he had checked the door before leaving to ensure it wasn't broken. He was worried that he hadn't locked it securely. That thought weighed heavily on him, because it meant he might have left his place vulnerable to anyone who could come in. But there was more. Min-cheol also regretted not giving Hanul the password to his front door in the first place. If he had, maybe she wouldn't have felt the need to send it. When Min-cheol's friend noticed his distress, he decided to ask him what was wrong. Instead of answering, Min-cheol drifted deeper into his thoughts. He realized that it would have been easier if he had simply put the strange video on silent mode. However, he recognized that it didn't matter now. He was still watching the video, and that filled him with guilt. After reflecting on the situation, Min-cheol came to a conclusion that made him feel even more frustrated. He believed that his friend was the cause of all his problems. In a moment of impulsive anger, he grabbed his friend tightly by the neck, blaming him for the chaos that had unfolded. It was his friend who had introduced him to the video in the first place, and if that hadn't happened, none of this turmoil would exist. His friend was shocked by Min-cheol's reaction. He was left wondering what had happened to provoke such a response. Later, Hanul was outside with her friend, enjoying some snacks. She had already shared the events of her day, but she told the story in a roundabout way. Instead of using Min-cheol's name, she referred to him as Guy 2 and mentioned another guy as Guy 1. Hanul explained how Guy 1 had told her something puzzling, prompting her to seek out Guy 2 to ask for clarification. However, when she arrived at Guy 2's house, she was confronted with something she found unspeakable. Unbeknownst to her, she voiced her realization loudly, drawing her friend's attention. Her friend, now suspicious, began to question why Hanul had lied about the situation in the first place. It struck her that Hanul was not just telling a story about someone else, but was actually describing her own experience. Hanul's friend, Min-ji, pretended not to know the full story and suggested that Hanul should let her friend approach Guy 2 first. She believed that this approach could help resolve the situation. Hanul wanted to feel confident that this plan would work, and Min-ji assured her that it would. Encouraged by her friend's support, Hanul agreed to follow Min-ji's advice and thanked her for listening to her concerns. As Hanul sat down, she spotted Min-cheol approaching from a distance. Panic set in, and she quickly stood up, telling Min-ji that she wanted to leave. As she walked away, her mind was racing. She understood that it would be challenging for Min-cheol to reach out to her first for reconciliation, since he had already stated that it was a misunderstanding. With this in mind, Hanul decided that it would be best for her to take the initiative. She resolved to apologize to him for the misunderstanding and express her hope that they could return to being close friends like before. Hanul had genuinely wanted to restore their friendship, just as she had promised herself. However, she found herself stunned by the strange situation they were in. It was an awkward position that neither of them had anticipated, and it weighed heavily on her mind. About half an hour later, Hanul spotted Min-cheol walking away and felt a surge of urgency. She began running after him, calling out his name as she hurried down the road. When Min-cheol turned around and saw her approaching, his expression shifted to one of surprise. He quickly picked up his pace and started running away, asking her why she was chasing him. Despite his retreat, Hanul pressed on, explaining that she had something important to tell him. However, Min-cheol wasn't in the mood to listen. Hanul's frustration grew when Min-cheol refused to listen to her, and in her anger, she unintentionally bumped into a guy holding a coffee cup. The drink spilled all over her shirt, leaving her feeling embarrassed as the fabric clung to her, making her figure more revealing. The guy immediately glanced at her, his eyes lingering a little too long for Hanul's comfort. He then pulled out his phone, claiming he wanted to get her number to reimburse her for the laundry fee, but Hanul could sense there was more to his intentions. Min-cheol, who had been watching the scene unfold, quickly reacted. He used his bag to cover Hanul's shirt, shielding her from the unwanted attention. Without a moment's hesitation, he grabbed her hand and urged her to go to their clubroom so she could change. Hanul was taken aback by his protectiveness, but she felt a sense of relief that he was there. The guy, noticing Min-cheol's sudden appearance and the intense glare directed his way, hesitated. Min-cheol's cold stare warned him to back off, and he quickly reconsidered his approach. Instead of calling out to Hanul, he chose to remain silent, realizing that he had crossed a line. Once they were in the clubroom, Hanul turned to Min-cheol, curious about why he had brought her there. He explained that he couldn't let her walk all the way to the women's dorm in her soaked shirt. He had planned to give her one of the t-shirts from last year, which the group seniors used to wear, so she could change into that before heading back. Feeling grateful for his assistance, Hanul noticed just how uncomfortable and sticky her shirt was against her skin. As she prepared to take it off, she suddenly paused. She remembered their childhood days when they used to change clothes freely in front of each other without a second thought. However, now that they were adults, the situation felt different, and a wave of self-consciousness washed over her. To ease the awkwardness, she informed Min-cheol that she was about to take off her shirt and asked him not to look over until he had handed her the replacement shirt. Just as she began to gather her courage to change, one of Min-cheol's friends unexpectedly opened the door. Min-cheol's friend, upon entering the clubroom, quickly noticed the tension in the air. He saw Min-cheol looking flustered because Hanul had removed her shirt, and without hesitation, he walked over to block his friend's view at the entrance. With a casual tone, the friend asked if Min-cheol would like to join him for drinks, but Min-cheol immediately refused. The friend then mentioned that he needed to drop off some things in the clubroom that Min-cheol was supposed to make for him. However, Min-cheol wasn't having it. He shot his friend a fierce glare and insisted that he should just hand over the items he needed to leave, making it clear that there was no need for him to enter the room. The seriousness of Min-cheol's expression left no room for argument. Sensing the intensity in the air and realizing that his friend wasn't in the mood to socialize, the friend reluctantly agreed. He handed over the items and quickly exited. Min-cheol began searching for Hanul, moving toward the corner of the room where he thought she might be. To his surprise, he discovered her hiding inside one of the lockers. She was stuck, her attempt to hide backfiring as she couldn't get out. Unable to contain his amusement, Min-cheol burst into laughter, finding the situation hilariously funny. He jokingly suggested that she should have been working out with him to avoid getting trapped. Realizing she needed help, Min-cheol approached her and grabbed her hands, ready to pull her free from the confines of the locker. However, as he exerted force to free her, they both lost their balance and ended up tumbling forward, with Hanul landing on top of him. The sudden turn of events left them both flustered, their cheeks flushing with embarrassment as they locked eyes for a moment, unsure of how to react. Meanwhile, the friend from earlier, who had left the clubroom, returned to try to open the door. He was surprised to find it locked. Knocking on the door, he called out, wondering if Min-cheol or anyone else was inside. Hanul felt the entire situation spiraling out of control, caught in a mix of panic and embarrassment. As Min-cheol lay there with Hanul on top of him, the close proximity brought back a flood of memories from their middle school days, for years earlier. He recalled a moment when one of their classmates had teasingly asked them if they were dating, given how close they always seemed. Min-cheol had quickly brushed off the idea, responding that he had never even considered Hanul as anything other than a friend. Curiosity had sparked in the classmate, who asked Min-cheol what he would do if he ever started seeing Hanul as a woman. At the time, Min-cheol had laughed off the notion, convinced that such a day would never come. In a moment of bravado, he had even made a bet with his classmate, jokingly claiming that if he ever found himself viewing Hanul as more than a friend, he would willingly become an eunuch. Min-cheol had confidently declared back in middle school that if he ever started seeing Hanul as a woman, he would become an eunuch. In response, Hanul jokingly claimed that if she ever dated Min-cheol, she would shave her head bald. Their playful banter escalated into a light-hearted bickering, which their classmate found hilarious. He couldn't help but film the amusing exchange, capturing their close friendship and teasing. Now, back in the present, Hanul was lost in her thoughts, but it was Min-cheol's voice that snapped her back to reality. As she realized the awkward position they were in, she quickly got off him, feeling a rush of embarrassment. Min-cheol, still trying to catch his breath, complained that she was too heavy and that he almost suffocated under her weight. Once they were both sitting up, they regained their senses. Min-cheol, still flustered, tossed the spare shirt he had brought for her, urging her to put it on and stop showcasing her current state. While he tried to act casual, Min-cheol was mentally shaken by what had just happened. He felt a mixture of embarrassment and relief, realizing he had narrowly preserved his dignity in a tricky situation that could have led to something much more awkward. After Hanul finished changing her shirt, she turned to Min-cheol and assured him that she wouldn't misunderstand him. She also apologized for leaving so abruptly the day before, expressing her desire to move on and return to their normal friendship. With that, she quickly gathered her things and left, mentioning she needed to work on her assignments. Min-cheol, left alone in the clubroom, felt a sense of relief wash over him. It seemed like everything was back to normal. Later that evening, Hanul found herself struggling with her assignments alongside her coursemates. They were all in the media department, but the class was divided. Half of the students were focused on design while the other half, including Hanul, were working on animation assignments. As she tried to concentrate, Hanul realized she couldn't focus at all. Her mind kept drifting back to the awkward situation in the clubroom with Min-cheol, replaying the moment they had fallen on each other. She felt a rush of heat rise to her cheeks as the memories flooded back. Feeling embarrassed and flustered, Hanul announced to her friends that she needed to go to the bathroom quickly. She hoped that stepping away would help her clear her mind and regain her focus. Hanul took a moment in the bathroom to compose herself. She scolded herself internally for continuously thinking about Min-cheol, especially his strong arm muscles. It confused her, and she wondered what was wrong with her. She rationalized that it must be because she had never been around other guys apart from him. Her heart raced as she thought about their friendship, and she couldn't help but feel a strange mix of emotions. Meanwhile, in his dorm room, Kim Min-cheol was lying on his bed, trying to relax. However, his mind was racing with thoughts of Hanul. He kept replaying the scene from the clubroom in his head, recalling how close they had been and how flustered they both felt. He was experiencing similar feelings of confusion and embarrassment as Hanul, contemplating what their friendship meant now. Later, Hanul received a call from her friends. They excitedly shared their plans for a group date, and she found herself agreeing to join them, even though a part of her hesitated. As she ended the call, Min-cheol was deep in thought about their own plans. He decided that they should grab tteokbokki together the next day, hoping that spending time with Hanul would help clear his mind and strengthen their friendship. Minji was taken aback when Hanul finally agreed to go on the group date, especially since Hanul had seemed annoyed when Sehue mentioned it during their shopping trip. Curious about her friend's change of heart, Minji asked if Hanul was considering starting to date someone. While applying makeup, she noticed Hanul's hesitation and decided to help her get ready. Minji suggested that Hanul change her clothes so she could style her hair afterwards. When Hanul emerged in a new dress, Minji realized that her friend's fashion sense needed improvement. Taking it upon herself, Minji offered to find better outfits for Hanul to wear. Once Hanul met up with her other friends, they were astonished by her new look, praising her for how pretty she appeared. They encouraged her to continue dressing that way. Hanul felt proud, sharing that Minji had helped her get ready for the group date. As they were preparing to enter the venue, Hanul's phone rang. It was Min-cheol calling. She hesitated briefly, but ultimately hung up, feeling a mix of anxiety and excitement. Her friends urged her to join them, and she set aside her thoughts about Min-cheol, focusing instead on the group date ahead. As they all entered the restaurant, Hanul felt a wave of excitement mixed with nerves. The atmosphere was lively, and the guys were already seated, waiting for their arrival. Sehue had taken her place across from her boyfriend, and as everyone introduced themselves, Hanul tried to remember their names amidst the chatter. After a round of introductions, they raised their glasses for a toast. This was Hanul's first time trying soju, and she felt a mixture of apprehension and curiosity as she took her first sip. The soju was surprisingly sweet, which helped ease her nerves, but she quickly realized that she was also feeling a bit tired trying to keep up with everyone's enthusiasm. The constant toasting was overwhelming, and she wondered if she would truly enjoy the evening. However, an hour into the gathering, Hanul started to acclimate to the lively atmosphere. The sweet taste of the soju made it easier for her to let loose and join in the fun. As she continued drinking, she could feel herself becoming more relaxed and comfortable in the group. During the evening, Sungyeon, who was her date for the night, noticed she might be drinking too much and handed her a glass of water. He advised her to balance her drinks, reminding her that if she only consumed alcohol, she would feel exhausted the next day. Hanul appreciated his concern, and the water helped refresh her a bit. They soon transitioned into playing a game, which added another layer of excitement to the evening. Sungyeon, eager to help her succeed, whispered hints about how to play effectively. With his guidance, Hanul found herself performing exceptionally well in the game, surprising not only herself, but also the others around the table. Hanul was buzzing with excitement after winning the game on her first try, her gratitude towards Sungyeon overflowing for his helpful hints. The camaraderie in the restaurant lifted her spirits, and she felt a surge of confidence. As the game progressed, the atmosphere remained lively, filled with laughter and playful banter. However, the mood shifted slightly when Sungyeon hesitantly asked Hanul if she was dating Min-cheol, known for his striking looks and popularity. A wave of irritation washed over Hanul at the mention of Min-cheol's name. It suddenly hit her that Min-cheol was a reason she had never really considered other guys seriously. She had always viewed him as more than just a childhood friend. So quickly jumped in to clarify that Hanul and Min-cheol were just childhood friends, a statement that Hanul confirmed. Yet, even as she said the words, a memory flashed in her mind. The time she had barged into Min-cheol's apartment and caught him in a compromising situation. The shock had been so overwhelming that she had ended up drinking an entire bottle of alcohol just to forget what she had seen, hoping to drown her embarrassment. Despite the fun atmosphere, Hanul still felt dizzy from the alcohol. She rested her head on the table, trying to shake off the wooziness, when she heard the familiar buzz of her phone. Rousing herself slightly, she checked her messages and saw a text from Min-cheol. He had finished his work around 2 p.m. and suggested they grab some tteokbokki once she was done with her outing. The thought of spending time with him made her heart flutter, even in her hazy state. At that moment, Sungyeon, sitting nearby, noticed her discomfort and leaned in to ask if she was okay. His concern was genuine, but as he moved closer, Hanul felt a surge of uncertainty. He seemed poised to kiss her, which made her pulse race. But just then, the door swung open. Min-cheol entered the restaurant, calling out to Hanul. He had brought the 2 beers she had ordered earlier, his presence instantly shifting the mood. Hanul's eyes flickered toward him, and in that instant, she couldn't help but admire how handsome he looked. Hanul's friend was seen as they were worried if Hanul would be fine, because they could see that it seemed she was drinking quite a bit that day. Meanwhile, Hanul, who just woke up again, was surprised to see Min-cheol before her. She was even confused as she did not know if she was actually hallucinating from drinking too much. She didn't even know what she was saying after all, so she tried passing out again out of embarrassment. But Min-cheol asked her why she was suddenly banging her head on the table. That was when he noticed Hanul's friend standing, and he saw that they were not seated because they were trying to be polite. So he just asked them about the quantity of bottles that Hanul took, and they replied that she drank a bottle and a half of soju. When he heard them talk about soju, he was shocked as he did not expect that Hanul would take such quantity, since that was her first time. So he tried remembering Hanul of her first time of drinking beer that she drank everything and later threw it up, showing that she should not have drank soju again because it is worse. Min-cheol really talked some senses into Hanul that day, and Hanul got angry back at him for talking to her anyhow. Then Min-cheol just handed her a drink to cool off the alcoholic behaviors in her. So she calmed down as she asked if he actually bought that for her, but Min-cheol replied that he did not, since they sold it where he worked. Then Min-cheol left to continue his work. While Hanul's female friends could not stop admiring Min-cheol's cuteness, even while wearing his uniform. Hanul then excused herself from her friends and told the guts she was sitting with that she's coming. So she went straight to where Min-cheol was, asking him why he did not let her know that he worked at that place, because she would not have come there. But surprisingly, Min-cheol replied that he actually told her. So he asked if she was now concerned about that due to the fact that she might be embarrassed as he had caught her hanging out with some pretentious guys. After all, Min-cheol knew that for guys to date a feisty girl like Hanul, then those guys would have to be a bit pretentious. Therefore, he would also pretend like he did not see anything. Hanul got angry with the way Min-cheol was talking about her, and just angrily decided to give him back his drink, as she told him that it's not good for him to just give out things that are for sale, but Min-cheol let her know that he already paid for it before he gave her. That shocked her and had to calm down, so she held back the drink. And that was when Min-cheol decided to want to have his drink back, but she was not ready to give him back, as she just instantly opened the drink and emptied the content into her mouth straight up. It really surprised Min-cheol. Then Min-cheol noticed that Hanul put on makeup, so he denied to ask her if he was right, and she replied that he is, as she explained that it was Minji who helped her with it. After all, she also knows that Min-cheol does put makeup on too. So Min-cheol just teased her off a bit. Back at where the guys were seated, Sung Hyeon was actually among them. They could not stop talking about Min-cheol, as they did not expect him to be that handsome by the way, but it just gave them that expression of celebrity looks better in person than on camera. Even Sung Hyeon, that was not always interested in stuffs like that, was kind of curious about Min-cheol. Although they all knew that he was handsome as well, but tend they accept that Min-cheol is mother handsome guy for real. When they heard that he is even in media department, they considered that department blessed. But then they all wondered why they see Min-cheol often, as they saw that he did not used to come to class, and they were in the same department. Whereas Min-cheol, on the other hand, just realized that it has been a while he has been standing outside, talking with Hanul, so he decided to return back to his duty when he read to ask Hanul if she has seen someone she liked at the group date she went to, but Hanul did not want to talk about it, asking him if that was even her concern. But then Min-cheol let her understand that he has to help her to check if the guy she likes is decent enough to be her boyfriend, as that would be her first boyfriend, but Hanul did not want that. Since Min-cheol did not have enough time left, he decided to take his leave, but still kept telling Hanul that he would be the one to help her screen her boyfriend. Yet Hanul told him not to bother. Then Hanul left as Min-cheol already gone. She was glad she chatted happily with him, and while on her way to back inside, she was surprised to meet Sung Hyeon outside. So Sung Hyeon explained to her that he actually came outside to check up on her, since he did not see her cone inside early. Then he asked if they could chat outside for a while. However, those inside were still chatting and having fun, but answered why Sung Hyeon was so interested in Hanul that he had to excuse himself from their midst to go and check on Hanul if she was fine. Some were having the doubt that he might be having something in mind, but others felt like they should not just judge him with his outward behaviors. Hanol was shocked when he heard from Sung Hyun that Jae-hee, whom she had a crush on, is actually a motel addict.